I'm going to turn one of the lower rungs for the side chair. I've equipped the lathe with a 1/2 inch steb center at the drive head and a 1/2 inch revolving or live center at the tailstock. The rungs on the tenon are 5/8 in diameter, which means I can turn right to the edge. So I cut my rung stock to exact length, which is a real advantage. I'll be using 3 turning tools, a Bedan, 3/8 inch wide Bedan for the tenons. You can also use a 3/8 parting tool. Along with the Bedan, I have a wrench that I've converted to a caliper. I've sized this opening to give me a real precise tenon diameter. For roughing, I use a 1-inch roughing gouge, and for the finishing cut, I use a skew chisel. It's really important to make sure that your tools are very sharp, especially the skew chisel and the Bedan. I start by marking center on the end of the rung stock. This allows me to get the rung centered and also to adjust for center if I need to do that. The rung is milled to, this rung is milled to about 1 1/8, and I want a 1 16th diameter maximum at the center. The only part of the rung that is full diameter is the center. The tenons will be turned down to 5/8 and everything else tapers to them. So it is important that the center gets centered, so I can check that here by measuring the distance from the rung to the tool rest, rotating 180 degrees and checking that, rotating 90 degrees, and another 180. And all that looks good. So I'm ready to turn, and I'll start with the tenons. The diameter of the tenon is a little bit oversized at this point, and I can make one cleaning cut. The tenons are 1 1/8 flat, and then the remaining 1/8 of an inch of the tenon is actually a slight taper moving into the body of the rung. The tenon is a very important part of making a good joint between the rung and the legs. And for some reason I can turn a tenon better on this side of the lathe than on this side. So I'm going to take the time to reverse the part. Good. I'm ready to Use the roughing gouge to rough out the part. Now that the part is roughed out, I'm going to switch to the skew chisel. I use a skew chisel. To use a skew chisel, I hold it at this angle, roughly when I'm going this direction, and I cut with this part of the blade, the lower third, right here. The nice thing about this is that it gives me a very wide shaving and consequently a very smooth surface. Going in the other direction, I just simply rotate the skew like that. I have an equivalent opposite angle to the angle going this way, and I'm going to be moving this direction. Again, cutting with the lower third of the blade and getting a nice wide shaving for a smooth cut. It's very important that you always move downhill using a skew chisel. The other thing I'm going to do, because the surface of the wood is bone dry, it helps to moisten the surface, and I use a piece of burlap that's been soaking in water to moisten the surface prior to turning. So here we go. The skew leaves a really beautiful, smooth surface that requires little or no sanding.